Do you find that the little voice inside your head is constantly nagging you to be more productive and get off the couch? You don't have time to be lazy. And you find yourself really unable to sit still for any length of time because you're deriving your sense of self worth from constantly being on the go? If this resonates with you, like it does for me and so many women, definitely join us for this week's conversation. I am privileged to have Angela Castrigno in the studio with me today to talk to you all about what she observes as a meal prep chef and how so many of us women really don't stop and smell the roses, so to speak. Hi, I'm Adrienne Irizarry. I'm an Eastern medicine practitioner who is passionate about women's health and helping women live their best lives. My goal is to put you in the driver's seat of your health, offering period solutions for a symptom-free life. Statements made in this program are for educational purposes only and not intended as a substitution for medical consultation or advice. We do not claim to diagnose, treat, or cure any diseases. This podcast is inclusive and welcomes all gender identities. The focus of the program is on biological function, and we will use the term women throughout, but it is referencing physiological and social challenges for biology, not identity. Come as you are, I am happy you're here and welcome all performances of identity. I hope you find something helpful in this show. Welcome back to another episode of the Reproductive Rebel podcast. I am really excited for this conversation. I am so privileged to have Angela Castrigno, Meal Prep Chef New Hampshire, on the show with me today. Welcome, Angela.
Thank you. So excited to be here.
So if any of you have followed me for a little while, my background is in Chinese nutritional therapy. So I've kind of been a food geek since the beginning. And Angela and I have geeked out about food over the course of time, and she is absolutely brilliant at coming up with really amazing recipes. So as we have had our foodie conversations, we've had some really cool themes come to the surface of some of these conversations, and it's the reason why I wanted to have her on the show today. One recent conversation that we had was about women prioritizing themselves and taking care of themselves, especially when it comes to nourishment. Now, that can come in a whole bunch of different forms. And obviously, because of Angela's expertise, we're talking about food. But I'm going to give the floor to Angela for a couple of minutes, have her introduce her amazing self to you all, and then we're going to kind of talk about this theme about a woman's worth and what we reinvest back into ourselves.
Thank you for that introduction. I'm so thrilled to be on this podcast. Adrienne and I have been connected for some time now with her work and mine. So it's really cool to be able to collaborate finally in this way. So I'm the owner of Meal Prep Chef New Hampshire, based in New Hampshire. And basically what I do is I support family, particularly women these days, in making time to nourish themselves. So sometimes that means I go over and I do meal prep for someone or their families because they just don't have the space to do that mentally or just in their schedules. And another way that looks is I actually coach people on how they can fit this type of nourishment into their life, meal prep style. That's why I'm the meal prep chef. But I just think, what I've seen over the years doing this is that it really is kind of tragic how little time we set aside to cook for ourselves or just to put good food in our body. So I'm really excited to talk with Adrienne and share her resources with my people as well, because I really feel like it's important to drive home that we shouldn't be sacrificing nourishing ourselves for productivity versus the other way around. So, yeah.
This is one of those themes that I feel really strongly about. So if you've been following the show for any length of time, I talk a lot about what rest looks like, and that we can't live in these seasons of spring and summer all the time. That if you look out the window, we see the trees shed their leaves, they let go at the end of the fertile season, the productivity season, and they rest. And in our daily lives, particularly in this modern world, we tend to have this nasty habit of valuing and only placing value on going 1,000 miles an hour. We almost martyr ourselves and talk about hyper productivity as a badge of honor, and how sleep deprived we are. And I haven't had a meal today. And like
Yes, it's
that type of stuff.
glorified.
It's terrible. And we wonder why we're so ill
Mm.
emotionally and physically. Like we wonder why we're ill. And it's because we place value on just go, do not stop. Everything has to look like a magazine cover. Like all of these standards, particularly as women that we hold ourselves to, are just really unhealthy. Our
It's
standards,
so
of
true.
beauty, home care, everything.
It's so true. I mean, we're all guilty of it.
Mm.
But not that long ago, like just a couple of years ago, I remember finding myself, and I stopped doing it since, but I found myself when I share things on my stories on Instagram, I was like going through this phase where I would like literally list all the things that I've done that day, like 10 o'clock, do this, like throughout the whole day. And like in a little weird way in the moment, it like felt good for me to like look at that long list and be like, yes, like look how productive I was today. And somehow if it wasn't, I would keep like thinking of things to add into it too. Like, what else did I do that I can add in? It's ridiculous. It's so ridiculous. And I got to this point where I was like, what am I doing? Like, this isn't the type of life I'm trying to encourage people to live. Why am I like doing this myself? And now I take more pride truly when it's like less things on there. I'm like, wow, look at the space I've created for myself today. That feels more productive to me now. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I love that. Well, and I remember when you were
But it's
doing that
hard
and
still.
stories.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I am equally as guilty. I sit here and talk about, yeah, we have seasons, we need to rest and all of these things. Like I very mindfully, because I was raised in this culture too. I'm
Yeah.
saturated in this just like you are. Like I remember when you did those stories and I was like, yeah, girl, get it, right? And but it's the same thing. Like I thrive off of checking boxes off a checklist. I'm like, yes, I
Yeah.
feel like I've
And
done
the
this work
praise we get
today.
sometimes too, like you just said, you're like, yeah,
Yes.
girl, get it. Like everyone's commenting on that post saying like, yeah, you go, like, look at this. And like, so it's kind of like positively
Yeah.
reinforced. So it feels good in the moment, but it's just not sustainable
It's not
ever.
sustainable. And that's one of the big reasons, like, I just felt so called to this conversation too, because we do place so much value in ourselves. Like, our sense of self worth in some ways is literally measured by, do I get to check all these damn boxes today? And I used to be like hyper guilty of this.
I was just going to
Um,
say the guilt comes in if you don't, like
Heavy
heavy
guilt
guilt. Yeah.
because you feel like you're being lazy. Like,
Yes,
I didn't do all these
exactly.
things. Well, I used to stack the deck against myself, and it took me a long time to realize that I was doing that. I used to, like, put an entire checklist together. Okay, cool. But it wasn't achievable in one day. Like, when I really took a look at it and I took a step back and I was like, "Can I honestly do all of this in one day?" And I always felt like I was failing. And
Yeah.
I would sacrifice eating my lunch in order to be able to check boxes off on this
Yes.
list. It was a snowball effect. And honestly, I worked myself into some metabolic issues because I made choices like
I
that.
believe it. I believe
And
it. And food is often like, it's one of the top things we do sacrifice. I was just talking to a client recently where, it was our first call together and I was asking her what her biggest challenges were. And one of the things she said to me, which, resonated too, was that, I wake up in the morning, like I have this plan to make my breakfast, sit down and eat it. And then I have like my plan for the rest of the day and it all fits in there. But for some reason, I get up in the morning and when it's time to do the breakfast thing, my brain gets overwhelmed and thinks that I'm wasting time because I need to get started on whatever the first thing is. And that really stuck with me that she was wasting time feeding herself. And like, how did we get there?
Mhm.
That's not okay. And, when we sit down and think about it, obviously, food is fuel, and we tend to be more productive when we take that time to feed ourselves, even though we create less time, to be productive. We're actually more productive in that shorter period of time because we actually fueled ourselves to do it. But that just really made me feel just kind of sad, and she wasn't the first person I've heard say that. And I felt that way myself. Like, I feel like I'm wasting time, taking a break for lunch
Mhm.
or at the very least, like if I'm going to have lunch, I need to have it at my desk while I'm, whatever you do, respond to emails or whatever it is. But it's just not okay.
Well, and when we work while we eat, which again, I'm also guilty of, I try really hard
Same.
not to do
Yeah.
it, right? So, like, I want to highlight in this conversation, like, I'm a practitioner, I know all of these things, and yet I mindfully have to make these choices because I've also been saturated in this same productivity culture. I still have the same levels of shame and guilt that come up over not
Yes.
checking off all the boxes on my to-do list. So I want to just talk about the human side of this, okay? Like, we just want to be successful and we want to be praised for that success. But what it's doing is it's making us ill. Because like I've sat at my desk and I've eaten answering emails and stuff like that before, and I, from a Chinese medicine standpoint, that actually makes you more ill because you need, not only do you need that nervous system break, right? You pause the being chased by a tiger feeling to do something different. So you're switching gears. That part is important for your nervous system. But from a how your food digests standpoint,
Yep.
you've got to step away from the desk because it causes spleen chi issues. So for women
Yep.
who have like flood bleeding, early starts to their periods, they wake up feeling really groggy in the morning and have a hard time
Mhm.
to like move that fog out of their head. They spot in the middle of their cycle, all of those kinds of things. Take a look at your eating habits. Are you standing while you're eating? Are you working while you're eating?
Oh, yes. Standing while you
These
eat
Yeah, these
all the
things,
time.
they're so subtle, but they really do impact the way that your body functions and shows up for you. And then we get mad because the body isn't showing up, and then we can't
Yeah.
continue to be productive.
Yeah. It's awful. And you know, there's always some sort of, maybe you don't feel like you're crazy stressed while it's happening, but if you're standing while you're eating or, casually doing emails while you're eating, like maybe you don't feel particularly stressed, or maybe you do, but that is more energy that the body is expelling. So if you're trying to eat at the same time, that's less energy your body can put towards digestion. And actually, very recently been experimenting with this more because I've just been on a hamster wheel lately. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to just sit and eat my breakfast and do nothing else. And I've been doing that for the past like 2 or 3 weeks, I would say. And my digestion is just so much better when I
Mhm.
do that because, if you're just sitting there, you're not like shoveling it in because you're trying to do tasks in between bites. You're eating a little bit slower, which is good. You're probably chewing more. I find my breathing is better when
Mm.
I eat without doing something else. And I find that helps with my digestion as well. Because, when you're eating fast and shoveling food in fast, you're breathing faster and maybe not as deeply. And I found that really affects, how you feel after you eat, which then affects your energy after and so on. So just a simple thing like eating without doing anything else can be really impactful.
Well, and digestion is like is that earth element in Chinese medicine. And like if you're not processing your food well, your cycle isn't going to show up for you either. Like just bringing it back into like symptoms that people are seeing. Like I have never met a person with endometriosis that doesn't have something digestive or intestinal going on. Like there
Don't
is
I know
totally
it?
there's totally a connection there, right?
Yeah.
Because their body doesn't have all the nourishment that it needs, the symptoms get worse. So
Yeah.
when, people who have endometriosis, like there's no cure for that, but you have to manage it. And when you're managing your endometriosis, one thing that is really helpful is to take mindful eating moments, whatever those windows look like for you, and
Mhm.
make sure you're chewing intentionally and you're not eating distracted. And again, I'm guilty of doing this. Like I had to get into the habit where I'm like, I do not bring my phone to the table. My phone goes and lives over there on the counter because I cannot imagine that there's any crisis if all of
Mm.
my
And
family
how
is in the house.
automatic is that for so many of us? Yeah, I was thinking
Yes.
about it the other day, like, my phone's right here. Like, it's
As
so
she chucks her
automatic.
phone across the
I
room
did.
for everybody
Yeah.
who didn't see
Like, why
that.
is it there? I don't need to be using that. I'm here talking to you, you know? It's that whole, being present, being present with your food, being present with whatever you're doing. And it's crazy how attached, like, it's just so automatic. Like, I get off the couch to go into the other room to make a snack. I take my phone with me. Why? I
Yeah.
just
Yeah. Oh my goodness, yes. Well, and like I just think about people that I see, when I go out to eat or whatever, and if they're by themselves, for example, I tend to see it more when people are by themselves. Although also a
yeah,
fair number of people who have
yeah,
a phone in their hand when they're across the table from another person too, which is
yeah.
a
That's a whole
topic.
nother
It's a
thing.
topic
Yeah,
all unto itself.
yeah,
But they're scrolling while they're eating, right? This is the mindless scrolling that we do, right? So you're looking at reels, you're reading things, you're whatever. And it's like, if you can take that distraction out and really just be present with your food and how it feels going in. And sure, if you want to let your mind wander a little bit, that's fine. So Thich Nhat Hanh has this Art of Mindfulness book I read a little while ago. And one thing that I really loved about that book, and I really put into practice several years ago, and this is why my phone doesn't live next to me while I eat anymore, or it's one of the things that prompted that anyway, because as somebody with celiac, my digestion is definitely not my friend.
Mm.
So he said that mindfulness can be found in any small task. So it could be washing the dishes, how the water feels on your hands, between
Yeah.
your fingers, the temperature. You're paying attention to like how your hands are moving through space, like all of that kind of stuff. Like it could
The
be something
senses.
as mundane as washing dishes. And yet there's so much that you can do to be fully present with that particular activity. Eating is absolutely no different. How we eat, the construct around how we eat. Like, I refuse to let my children eat food in front of the television. You eat more, you're not conscious
Good
of the
on you.
activity. Like, I only have one television in my house, and even that is like a challenge sometimes.
It
But,
is just like the
like,
phone, automatic.
exactly, exactly. And like I now have teenagers and I have one teenager that has a phone and right, but I'm trying to show like good hygiene with all of that so that they learn how to eat in a mindful way. They learn how to be present in a mindful way, but we all eat together. Like my whole family of 5, we sit down and we eat together. And
I
it is
love
a
that.
community activity. Like I grew up that way. My husband and I feel really strongly that this is important. Even when we're at camp during the summer and I've got kids that are like free range chickens everywhere, like when it is dinner time, everybody comes back and we all sit around the picnic table and we all eat together. And we're the only family that I see do that regularly. And for me, it's all about presence and being really embodied and connecting with the people that
Yeah.
matter most to you that are like right here in front of you. So I think that it's really important for us to start finding ways that we can bring this level of intentionality into small little routine things. Because if we're conscious of it, then we start paying attention to some of these little behaviors.
Absolutely. And I love that you used the example of washing dishes a moment ago. As a personal chef, I wash a lot of dishes and I find that is kind of my, just as an example, like that's kind of my respite to be mindful. I'm go cooking this, boiling that, chopping that. And it's like when I start to feel like not centered or something, I'll be like, I'm going to do some of the dishes now. And I go and do the dishes. And it's almost like this brief sort of meditative period where, because it's like, you don't really have to think about washing dishes that much. So it's breathing, it's feeling the water, it's, putting the care into taking care of, the things that help you provide this food. And I think presence is a big part of this. And also, gratitude.
Mm.
And I feel, because we're so busy and, on the productivity wheel, we don't take that time. So being present and also expressing, even if it's just, thinking about it in your head, like your gratitude for the food you're eating or the gratitude for, if you're washing dishes, so I'll just keep going on that example, oh, I'm so glad like I have, these plates, these clean plates to eat my food off of. I'm so glad that I have these tools so that I can provide myself or my family or whoever homemade healthy meal that I know everything that goes into it. I'm so thankful that even when you're working, just like, oh, I'm glad that I have, this means to support myself. And I'm saying this, I think, because if you're struggling to be present, because being present is difficult because of, I think for a lot of people, it's stressful to be present because it's silence sometimes. For a lot of people, it's being in your thoughts. It's being uncomfortable sometimes, I think, for some people. So if you're struggling trying to think of like, oh, well, like, what do I do while I'm trying to be present? Like, what am I supposed to think about while I'm just eating, just eating? But, that could just be a place to start. Just say, gosh, I'm really glad that I can just sit here and nourish myself with good food.
Now I'm going to take this one step further because we're talking about being grateful and what we do with this time. And we really have lost the ability as a culture to be alone with our thoughts. We're in probably the deepest level of escapist culture in history right now between recreational opportunities and alcohol. I mean, think about the number of wine o'clock shirts that you can find out there. Like, I'm not saying that to shame anyone. I'm saying that this is culturally where we've kind of brought the needle, right? So we don't, in general, as a practice, spend a lot of time alone in our thoughts. And some of that is because our thoughts, that little inner critic voice inside of our brain, can be a real jerk.
A
And
total jerk.
A total jerk.
Yeah. I love that.
Check off all the things on your list, man.
It's like, leave me alone, jerk. Like,
so do you think, this is where I'm taking this like one step further. Like, do you think that part of why we don't prioritize being able to take that time to make ourselves breakfast or lunch? For me, it was lunch. I was guilty of that. I would get breakfast in and then I would just completely bypass lunch because I would allow myself to be too busy. And then I would eat too much at dinner and I felt like crap.
Yep.
So do you think that is because our inner critic sabotages our sense of worth that we don't deserve?
Yeah, 100%. We said it earlier. No, it's like that guilt feeling. Like that's the feeling. It's like when I ask people, it's like, well, what's wrong if, sit down and do this for a minute or whatever. And they're just like, they say, and you said this word already, they say, well, I feel guilty or I feel lazy and they're just like sabotaging their self-worth, like immediately. That's immediately where people's minds go to if you ask them, like, well, what does it feel like for you when you sit down to read, or maybe it is just to watch like an episode of some silly show on TV? Like, what feels so bad for that about that? Like, why can't you relax doing that? And I struggle with that huge. Like, I'm not a TV person because I literally cannot relax when I'm watching TV, and because I feel like I need to be doing something, and this just reminded me of something that happened not too long ago. I was at home. I can't remember why I was doing it, but I was like, I'm going to sit down and watch a movie. Like, I was home alone. There wasn't a whole lot going on, and it was a rainy day. And I was like, I'm going to sit down and watch a movie that I want to watch by myself. And it was really hard and weird. Like, I kept getting up and doing other things, and I couldn't just sit there. And when my partner came home, and when he comes home, I am not sitting on the couch watching TV ever. I'm busy doing something in the house somewhere. He's the one who will turn the TV on first. And so he comes home, and I'm on the couch watching TV. And my immediate reaction when he opens the door and he looks at me, I'm like, I'm watching TV. like nothing to see here,
Yeah.
It's not what it looks like. I'm not sitting here not being productive, like that kind of energy. And my response, and he was just like, cool, watch TV, babe, it's just, and afterwards I was like, why did I feel so weird about that? It's like I was almost looking at the door while I was watching the movie to see when someone was coming in so I could like get up and do something or something. I don't know. So I think it runs really deep for a lot of people, the self-worth piece.
Oh, I just felt like my whole body turn on when you said that, because like I do the same thing and I don't think I even realize that I do. Like, I'm always moving too. I'm doing something, I'm herding my children, whatever it is. And like my husband doesn't come home. Actually, I think he's noticed it more than me, because recently we do sit down as a family to watch TV at the end of the day, but we'll watch like a couple episodes of a show or whatever. And
Sure.
again,
Yeah.
we do it all together as a family, right? Like it's
It's
like our
intentional.
connecting point at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Well, but Adrienne still does stuff during that time. She sits and steams. She stands on her vibration plate. She stretches on the floor. Like, I still feel like I have to
And what
be
is everybody else doing?
sitting.
They're just sitting watching the TV. Yeah.
And so, like, my husband recently, and it's so funny that you say that, because I didn't even really consciously think about it until you were explaining your movie situation.
I
That
hadn't either until it happened. I was like, the way that he reacted to my reaction was like, that was the thing that made me be like, why was that a thing? It's just,
Yeah. I feel like that pressure for me increased when I had kids. Like, I had my daughter, and then when my husband and I got together, we became a blended family. So I went from being a single mom of one to a mom of three very quickly. And when they were really little, because they were super little when we got together, there was always something to do. There was always toys to pick up. There was always like clutter somewhere. Somebody had, was potty training and missed the toilet. Like, there was always something. And so, like, I just never ever sat down, and I don't remember ever seeing my mother sit down. My mom got a little 9-inch
exactly.
TV that stuck in the corner of the kitchen, and we had this, and I'm going to date myself really bad saying this, so, buckle up for any of you who are like under 30. But we had this thing called rabbit ears, and it was like this little box that like sat on top of the TV, and like there was a box on her TV. So whatever we were watching in the living room, she could watch while she was washing dishes,
Yeah.
while she was prepping food.
Like, remember
all
those
that.
little tiny TVs?
Yes, that's
Those,
exactly
like,
what it
yeah.
Yes.
Okay. That's what I thought.
She still has that to this day in this kitchen, and like it's not flat screen, it's like this big deep thing that sits in the counter, right? So she still uses it, but we would watch a movie together as a family, and like all of us, my dad, and
She's in the other room.
and she was in the other room doing something, right? So like we had this behavior modeled for us. And recently, my husband has started handing me the remote control at the end of the evening, like while I'm actually sitting next to him on the couch. The part that's actually keeping me a little less mobile is I like cuddling my puppies on my lap. So
Oh,
that
yes,
does
of
keep me
course.
sitting in one
Yeah.
place a little bit longer, but I still sit and steam. And I now have a puppy that like lays on the hassock next to where I'm doing my pelvic steaming. And he's like
Oh,
waiting for me to get done so that he could come and sit on my lap, which is really cute.
oh my
But
God.
like,
I want that to be my life.
but but, like, as I'm going through this, I'm like, "Oh, man." And I said, "Why do you keep giving this to me?" He goes, "Because you always say, like, you never control the television." And it's true. Like, I never
Yeah.
watch anything that I wanna watch by myself. I never sit down and just turn it on if the room is empty. The
Do you
television stays
also
off.
feel, yeah. So I have kind of a similar thing. Like sometimes, my partner will hand me the remote, but I have this feeling of like, well, I don't know what to do. Like, I don't know what to put on, like, because I don't spend time doing it. He always controls it because I'm just like, no, if you give me the remote, I'll probably just turn it off and do something or just not choose anything. And then so eventually I just don't choose anything and he'll take it back and put something else on. I appreciate what he's doing because he'll say, he's like, oh, I've been monopolizing the TV. Like, why don't you pick something? And I just like don't even know what I want in that
Mhm.
moment because I don't know what would relax me or make me, laugh or relax or whatever. So, which brings on another point. It's like we're so productivity driven. It's like we don't even know what to do when we have the time for real to relax. I don't know if you can relate to this, but it's like I find sometimes when I have open space, I actually get kind of like anxious and antsy of like, oh my God, nothing's on my calendar tomorrow. That doesn't happen often, mind you, but like nothing's on my calendar tomorrow. Like, what am I going to do? It's almost like a panic, which is so sad saying that out loud, but it's just what I'll say that I'm like, oh, what am I going to do tomorrow? I have all this time. And, my partner, Jamie, will be like, oh, you should go do something relaxing, go get a massage or go for a walk or, whatever, just all these things. And everything that he lists off, I have some sort of feeling or reason inside me where like, no, I don't need to do that. I can find something more productive to do, more productive than taking care of myself. Not that we need massages and like all this stuff, but it's like, you know, God forbid I consider doing something for my body or my mind in like a health mindset way. Like, God forbid I put more worth on that than, cleaning the garage. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
It's almost like feeling worthy of pouring back into your own cup.
yeah,
I find this with women in my practice all the time. Like they get really excited about like a course that I'm offering or an event that I'm holding or something like that. And then they'll look at it and they'll go, but there's all of these things that I have to do. There's all of these other places that money needs to get spent because of kids and household stuff. And I don't even like buy new clothes for myself when I've lost
ugh,
weight or
yeah,
when I've
finance
gained
is a whole
weight or
nother thing.
whatever, but it all ties into
Yeah,
what we hold as our worth.
yeah,
Do we feel that we are worth investing back in ourselves? Whether that is buying a dress that makes us feel beautiful, and this could be a clearance $20 dress, but we will find a reason to not justify spending that $20 on ourselves. And, we find reasons to justify not taking the time to make ourselves breakfast. We
yeah.
find reasons to justify not sitting quote unquote idle for a few
Mm,
minutes. And this is why we have epidemic levels of fertility challenges, period problems, and so many people are suffering with mental health and physical health problems. Like we are worth pouring back into that cup. I 1,000% resonate with what you just said. I spent a lot of time, and for me, I think I was able to kind of balance the plates. And I say kind of because in retrospect, hindsight's 2020. I look back at
Mm.
it and I go, well, okay, maybe I wasn't balancing it as well as I thought I was. And I would go into work and people are like, "You're always so put together. You'd never know that you're a mother of 3." And it's like, yeah, because I stress myself the fuck out before I get in here to make it
Yeah.
look like I'm doing this all effortlessly, right? Does anybody listening resonate with this?
Oh my God. I
So
know they do.
so so, like, we do all of this stuff, and for what, right? And for me, it really came crashing down in 2020 when everything came to a standstill and my kids just appeared at home with laptops from the school and they said, "Oh, I don't know if we're going to school on Monday." They sent us home with these laptops and then the whole world shut down.
Mm.
Well, I had a whole bunch of wobble in terms of needing to rethink how my practice was going to run. I had to figure out Zoom school with 3 kids, like just all of these things to try to just keep all of the balls in the air. And that is really for me when the rubber hit the road in terms of me saying, "Holy crap, like I don't value myself enough." I had worked myself into sleep issues. I had worked myself into metabolic issues. I feel like I put 20 pounds on overnight because I had so much cortisol coursing through my system. And going camping was the best thing that I ever did for me and for my family because I was able to reset that sleep clock a bit. I started getting back in touch with nature, spending more time outside, really like rising with the sun and going to sleep with those rhythms. And it made a huge difference. But for me, that's where the crisis point hit. We all hit that crisis point where
Yeah.
we have to start making
Yeah.
those decisions about like, if I don't start pouring into my own cup, this is going to start going really bad really fast. And it takes mindful work to work through those feelings of I feel lazy, I feel guilty that I'm not moving. So I used to feel a lot of guilt around having an appointment to go to the chiropractor or having an appointment to go to the acupuncturist or something of that nature. And I would get ready to leave the house and everybody was like, "Where are you going?" And they were like, all up in arms about this idea that mom was leaving
Yeah.
and how dare she do that? I have things you must do, woman, right? And so it took a little bit for me to shake that off. So, it's taken practice. So none of what we're talking about is going to come easy as you get started doing it. None of what we're talking about is going to just be as second nature as breathing at first. And believe me, even once you have practice with it, it's still, you're going to have moments where you're going to catch yourself and go, "Am I sacrificing myself for the good of the people?" Right? So I started having this mantra and I write it down in my journal all the time: body first, business second.
I love that.
Now, well,
Yes.
body we understand, but business
Yeah.
could be like actual practice, but business could be the stuff I have to take care of with my family. It could be all of these things. And as I sit on the doorstep of a big birthday here, I've been reflecting back on the last decade of my life and things that I would like to change as I turn the page into a new decade. And one of the big things that comes up for me is I want to be mobile when I'm an older woman. I want to be able to live life and enjoy my life and not have my health hinder my ability to live my life to the fullest. And that requires balance. That requires me taking that time to pour back into my own cup. And I've started my days slower. Like I give myself like a full hour of meditation, a little bit of stretching, journaling, pull oracle cards, whatever it is. I do those things for about an hour. And then I get up and then I'm doing something intentional with my movement, whether that's yoga, whether that's weightlifting, whether that's riding the spin bike, like whatever it is. Like I do something intentional with my movement for another 30 to 45 minutes. And then I integrate myself into my day. Now, is it a perfect system every single day? No. I have teenagers and they get into fights with each other and I have dogs that, need to be attended to, whatever. Like life happens. But making that an intentional plan for myself, I go to bed a little earlier so that I can get up earlier, so I can allow myself a slower integration into my day. I used to be the kind of person that would roll out of out of bed and like that t-shirt that says like her feet hit the floor and the devil was like, "Oh God, she's up." Like I used to be that person where I'd be like 5,000 miles an hour right out of the gate, like just run, got to get all the things done, right? And I was
Yeah.
like up at night worried about my to-do list for the next day.
Ugh,
As
yeah.
women, we need our sleep, 8 to 10 hours. We need the sleep because so much of our hormones come out of our adrenals. It's very different for men. Men can deal with a lot more sleep deprivation than we can because only 3% of their hormone production, their sex hormone production, comes out of their adrenals. The rest comes out of their testes. For us, it's like a 60-40 split, 70-30 split. We have a large percentage of our sex hormones that come out of our adrenals. And then as people get closer to menopause and they begin their perimenopausal journey, part of the reason why we feel like we're riding a freaking roller coaster the entire time is because we've burnt our poor adrenals out with this not pouring back into our cup and going 50,000 miles an hour and feeling shame and guilt and all of these things around relaxing
Yeah.
and pouring back into our cup. And maybe it's not a massage. Maybe you go for a walk in the woods. Maybe you take your dog for a 10 or a 15-minute walk where you're looking at the cloud animals and taking pictures of flowers as you're going and
And
not
leaving
going,
your
oh
phone
God,
at home.
we could go. Like,
Yeah.
like not in a rushed way. Like I tell people, if you can take a walk at lunch, give yourself 10 or 15 minutes. Not only is it good for your nervous system, but like you're pouring back into your cup. You deserve that break.
Yes. And it's so little time.
Mhm.
Like, I was listening to a podcast this morning or the other morning, can't remember, but someone was tracking their phone usage on their phone and it was like hours, like
Yeah.
not productive stuff, just scrolling and stuff like that. It's like take 15 minutes out of those hours that you spend scrolling on your phone and go for
Yeah.
a walk outside. Like, and I like how you were using the word slower, like moving slower. It's versus stopping. I think stopping is jarring for some people because it's like, oh, God forbid we stop, but just moving slower, not all the time, but just like taking those moments to move a little slower. And I know that some people that I talked to, when you mentioned, going to bed earlier so that you can wake up earlier, I think for a lot of people, that evening time, maybe staying up a little later, reading or watching TV, like it's like not until those later hours that women will kind of allow themselves to be like, okay, the day is completely over. It is nighttime, past the early evening. Like I sit down now and they'll take that time and that becomes a little bit of a precious time to them. So going to bed early feels like it's robbing you of that time. It's like you're so tired and you can fall asleep at the drop of a pin, but you're like, oh, but this is the only time I have. I don't want to lose it. But if we can just look at it, if we go to bed earlier, you're going to get the rest you need quicker. And maybe you can get up at that earlier hour and just move slowly in the morning. What if we shifted to having our downtime, me time in the morning, which sounds horrible to some people I know because, they get up and they're like, I gotta go. It's like, what if you just had this window of time in the morning where the productivity part of the day just hasn't started yet? And that is just your time. Maybe the magic time is 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, where, okay, when the clock strikes that hour, that's when I give myself permission to like go into busy mode. And then
Mhm.
all the minutes leading up to that hour, and you get to decide how long that is, depending on how early you go to bed and wake up, that is my me time. If you can just give yourself permission to have, that is your window to do with whatever you please. And then, when the hour strikes, it's like, okay, now I give myself permission to be productive. Because we're not saying to not do your productive things, like we have to do these things, but it doesn't have to consume every waking moment. So I think just allowing for that slow time is really important. And the way you described, that get up and go routine, my partner he's awful with it. He's doing better. We've actually been talking about how it's been helping, but the alarm goes off, and before I even realized what that noise is, he is down the hall into the kitchen, starting the kettle for coffee. He springs up.
Yeah.
I can't even believe it. I'm like, when we started dating, I was like, I thought there was a friggin' fire. I was like, what do I need to get up to? What is happening? And in recent months, he's been telling me, he's like, I've been forcing, he has to force himself, but he's like, I've been trying to just move slower in the morning. He's like, I don't know why my alarm goes off and I just feel like I have to go immediately. I just feel like I don't have time and I just need to move. And he's like, and then I get to work, 45 minutes early. And then I'm like, why did I do that? So it's just this automatic routine, built into our bodies. That's really hard to, reverse. So just back to your point of this not being something that can change overnight, and to not put pressure on yourself to change it overnight. This isn't meant to be another to-do thing on your productivity list. This is purely to benefit you, this slowing down, this changing of the routine a little bit. And if making a change like that feels just like another thing on your plate, then maybe just start even smaller and just practice, when you're doing whatever it is you already do for your routine, just practice the presence piece and the grateful piece. Maybe that's all you do to start. It's not taking away, time wise or energy wise from anything. Just go about your day, doing your busy stuff, being productive, and then just practice the presence piece while you're doing it. If we can at least slow our brains down a little bit while we're being productive, physically moving and typing and whatever it is we're doing, if we can slow our brain down first, I find that helps continue that slowing down through the body, if that makes sense.
Oh, beautifully said. I was just thinking as you were talking, I was like, I think that's the note we gotta end on right there because
Yeah.
because it's true. If you do slow the physical function of it down, you're actually creating space in your body, in your energy, all of these things in order to actually invite in what that next step in creating more space for yourself looks like.
Yeah. You
For
need to
me,
create the space for it.
yeah, it's been a 2-year process for me. It's been a 2-year process for me. So I don't want you to think that this is something that is going to happen overnight. You're going to cut all of these things out of your life. Because again, if you're doing it in a very regimented way, one, that's a very masculine energy way of looking at it. Right. And anytime you keep yourself in masculine energy, you're working outside of your natural flow, which is more feminine energy, regardless of how you identify. Our hormones put us in a more feminine energy state, right? A lot of us default to sitting in masculine energy, one, because again, we default to a productive energy society. A lot of us have to provide for ourselves in one way or another, whether we have partners or not. And that requires us being in this decision making, forward thinking, linear kind of way of being. But energetically, we can only hold ourselves in that space so long before we start to have health issues and other issues, right? Like mental
Yeah.
health, physical health, before we start to have issues. So being able to spend that time in gratitude and being present in those moments helps us to move more into an embodied state because you're paying attention to how does my body feel while I'm doing this? What is it about this situation that makes me feel this way? And as we start tapping into that F word, that feelings word, right? We're starting to move ourselves more into that feminine flow, which, not to be punny about flow or whatever, but it literally does help the
Please
flow
do.
of your period.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm a pun master, man. But it literally helps the flow of your entire cycle, the way that your hormones communicate with themselves, the way your period shows up for you every month, all of these kinds of things. Like when you're swimming with the current, it takes less energy to go further than when you are trying to swim against it. And being in a more embodied place, you're swimming with it. It actually helps your productivity.
Yes, I was just thinking that.
Mhm.
Always, we're so worried about it, about sacrificing the productivity by taking time to slow down, when in reality, it enhances it every time,
Every
every
time.
time.
I
Yeah.
find all of the creative answers to the problems that I am spinning out about drop in when I allow myself space.
Yeah. 100%.
So, baby steps. All of this is going to happen in baby steps. And really let this podcast be your invitation to take a look at what is working and what isn't working in the way that you're moving through the world right now. Are you allowing yourself enough time for proper nourishment? Are you allowing yourself time to decompress? Are you allowing yourself breaks during the day so that you can take a deep breath and allow that stressed out, harried, tight muscled, tight neck that often can encourage headaches kind of feeling to go, I don't have to hold the weight of the world on my shoulders right now. I'm going to be okay. This is going to be okay. I'm going to take a couple of deep breaths. I'm going to come back into my body. I'm going to ask her how she's feeling. One of my favorite ways of doing this is putting my hands over my heart and I ask my body, like, what do you feel right now? Or how are you feeling right now? Or why do we feel this way? Right? Like if I feel that I'm tight here in my chest, because for me, that's where stress sits.
Same, same. And then I
you know,
say, what do you need? I
yeah,
ask her, what do you need?
that's beautiful. And not enough of us take enough time to do that. So
Yes.
let this
What do you
show.
need to do?
Yes.
What,
Oh,
what do
yes.
you need?
That is perfect. And I'm glad you made that level of clarity there too, because it's true. What do you need and what do you need to do are oftentimes two very different
Yeah.
things. So we invite you from our heart to check in with yours and ask yourself, what do I need in order to feel like the most radiant version of myself?
Yes.
And every day take one step in that direction and you'll get there and you'll be surprised how fast you get there. 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, giving yourself, maybe 20 more minutes in your wake up routine before your feet have to roll out of bed in the morning. All of those things add up. They add up and your body thanks you for that and she will show up better for you and you'll be less sick. You'll be less stressed. You'll be able to actually enjoy and live your life in a much more meaningful way that way.
Yes.
So, do you have any final thoughts, Angela, before we end this show?
I guess the last thing I would say is at the end of the day to just be kind to yourself, which sounds kind of cheesy and cliche, but it really is just so important. The negative self-talk is so real and heavy for so many of you, and for myself too, many a times. That adds more stress than you could imagine, honestly. Like it really shows up in your body when you're beating yourself up about these things. So just be kind to yourself, thank your body, thank your mind, allow yourself space, allow yourself to be slow, and don't berate yourself for doing it. It's not fair to you. You wouldn't encourage someone you care about to behave the way that you're behaving or treat your body the way you're treating your body. If someone came up to you, a dear friend or a family member, and described what was going on in their life and how they're going about your life, you would say, girl, you need to slow down, right? Or something like that. You need to take time for yourself or whatever it is. And yet you are not walking that talk. And I know that is so, 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 so hard. But in any case, just be kind to yourself.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me. This has been an amazing conversation. I think we might have to have another one, Angela.
Well, always. I could talk to you all day. You know that.
So if people are looking for you, how can they reach out to you if they are interested in one-on-one coaching with you or in meal prep services if you are local to the Seacoast area of New Hampshire?
Yes, and thank you for being specific about that. So I'm mostly on Instagram for social media. I don't spend a lot of time on Facebook. So on Instagram, my handle is Meal Prep Chef NH, as in New Hampshire. So Meal Prep Chef NH on Instagram, and my website is mealprepchefnh.com. And those are both good ways to reach out to me. I do check my DMs weekly on Instagram, and I check inquiries from the website pretty regularly too. And that is for both personal chef services and also for meal prep coaching, which is basically teaching you how to integrate this into your life so that you don't feel like you are sacrificing anything.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Angela. This was an amazing conversation, as always. Keep watching because Angela and I have a little bit of collab work that is coming up.
Yes, we do.
I am so excited about it. And she is fabulous with recipes. I have made several of her creations that are huge hits in my household. So
All right.
you're definitely going to want to stay tuned for that. And thank you again for joining us for another episode of Reproductive Rebel. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Reproductive Rebel. Reproductive Rebel is recorded by certified peri-steam hydrotherapist and acutonics practitioner, herbalist, and Chinese nutritional therapist, Adrienne Irizarry of Moon Essence LLC. If you are interested in setting up an appointment for one-on-one support, ordering from our store, or checking out our course offerings, visit our website at moonessence.life. Be sure to subscribe to our newsletter and get insider information on upcoming events and offerings. Join the conversation. Like and follow us at Moon Essence Me on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. Your voices make this program possible. Thank you all for your continued support.